киевскому режиму, которому его западные хозяева поставили задачу создать агрессивную антироссию.
The Kiev regime, which its Western masters have set the task of creating an aggressive anti-Russia, is indifferent to the fate of the people of Ukraine. The fact that people are dying, that hundreds of thousands of millions have become refugees, that a real humanitarian catastrophe is taking place in the cities that are held by neo-Nazis. Their armed criminals released from prisons. Everything is indifferent. For us, it is also obvious that Western patrons are simply pushing the Kiev authorities to continue the bloodshed. They are being supplied with new batches of weapons, intelligence, and other assistance, including the deployment of military advisors and mercenaries. As a weapon, they have chosen economic, financial, trade, and other sanctions against Russia, which are now hitting the Europeans and Americans themselves, by the way, through rising prices for gasoline, energy, food, through the loss of jobs associated with the Russian market. And it is not necessary here, it is not necessary, as they say, to shift from a sick head to a healthy one. Blaming our country for everything. I want to be heard by ordinary citizens of Western countries. Now they are persistently trying to convince you that all your difficulties are the result of some kind of hostile actions of Russia, that from your own wallet you have to pay for the fight against the mythical Russian threat. All this is a lie. And the truth is that the current problems that millions of people in the West face are the result of years of action by the ruling elites of their states. Their mistakes, myopia, and ambitions. These elites are not thinking about how to improve the lives of their citizens in Western countries. They are obsessed with their selfish interests and super profits. Evidence of this is the data of international organizations, which directly say that social problems, even in the leading Western countries, have only been aggravated in recent years. That inequality is growing, the gap between the poor and the rich. Racial and national conflicts make themselves felt. The myth of the Western welfare society, the so-called golden billion, is collapsing. I repeat, today the entire planet has to pay for the ambitions of the West. For his attempts by any means to maintain his elusive dominance. The imposition of sanctions is a logical continuation, a concentrated expression of the irresponsible, short-sighted policy of the governments and central banks of the US and EU countries. It was they who, in recent years, with their own hands dispersed the spiral of global inflation. By their actions, they have led to an increase in global poverty and increased inequality. Two new flows of refugees around the world. And the question arises, who is now responsible for the millions of starvation deaths in the world's poorest countries due to the growing food shortage? I repeat, a serious blow has been dealt to the entire global economy and trade. By confidence and to the US dollar as the main reserve currency. So illegitimate actions to freeze part of the foreign exchange reserves of the Bank of Russia draws a line under the reliability of the so-called first-class assets. In fact, both the US and the European Union have declared a real default on their obligations to Russia. Now everyone knows that financial reserves can simply be stolen. And seeing this, many countries in the near future can begin, and I'm sure this will continue to happen, to convert their paper digital savings into real reserves, in the form of commodities, land, food, gold, other real assets. That will only increase the deficit in these markets. We'll add that the arrest of foreign assets, accounts of Russian companies and individuals is a lesson for national business as well. That there is nothing more reliable than investing in your own country. I have spoken about this, personally, and repeatedly. We appreciate the position of those foreign companies that, despite shameless pressure from the United States and their vassals, continue to work in our country. In the future, they will definitely get additional opportunities for development. We also know those who cowardly betrayed their partners and forgot about their responsibility to employees and customers in Russia. I hurried to earn ghostly dividends on participation in an anti-Russian company. At the same time, unlike Western countries, We will respect property rights. The containment policy, the weakening of Russia, including through the economic isolation of the blockade, is a conscious, long-term strategy. With us, the leaders of the West no longer hide the fact that the sanctions are not directed against individuals or companies. Their goal is to strike at our entire domestic economy, in our social, humanitarian sphere, for every family, every citizen of Russia. In fact, such steps aimed at worsening the lives of millions of people have all the hallmarks of aggression. Worse by economic, political, information means. It has a totally undisguised character. And, I repeat, the so-called Western political bowman does not even hesitate to speak about it in plain text. All verbal tinsel about political correctness, about the inviolability of private property, freedom of speech. All this flew off overnight. In many Western countries, people are subjected to real persecution today just because they are from Russia, deny medical attention. They kick children out of schools. They put their parents out of work. Russian music, culture, literature are banned. Trying to cancel Russia, the West tore off all the masks of decency and began to act boorishly. He showed his true nature. A massive attack has also been launched against Russia in cyberspace. An unprecedented information campaign has been unleashed, which involves global social networks and all Western media, the objectivity and independence of which turned out to be just a myth. Access to information is limited, people are stuffed with a huge number of fakes, propaganda forgeries. In other words, limes. It got to the point that one of the American social networks directly announced the possibility of publications calling for the murder of Russian citizens. We understand what a resource this empire of lie has. But against the truth, injustice, she is still powerless. Russia will consistently bring its position to the attention of the whole world. And our position is honest and open. And more people hear it, understand, and share.
Оппозиция у нас честная и открытая. И все больше людей ее слышат, понимают и разделяют.